how best to situate ourselves in this current moment. Um, we have here Dr. Melba Beals, with whom I have the honor of having a conversation today. And thank you all again for being a part of it.
It's
Dr.
my blessing. It's my blessing to be here. And let me just witness the fact that I went to USF and there are a few places on earth that I am very comfortable. If I could do my doctorate again, I would do it. It was a happy place for me. It still is a happy place whenever I get to come there for any reason. It's just a wonderful, wonderful family feeling there, you know.
Thank you so much, Melba. I think one of the ways in which I'm coming to this conversation is, of course, with so much gratitude. It's such an honor to be in conversation with you and to learn from you, but also to feel so proud that you are a graduate of the School of Education at USF. And maybe we can kind of start the conversation by situating it in this moment of converging pandemics. Of course, we have been going through this health crisis called COVID-19. We're also at a time when there's a re-realization around state-sanctioned violence against Black individuals and communities. And I think in one of our conversations, Melba, you said something that really stuck with me, which was that seeing the violence and the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in many ways for you brought back those feelings of intense fear and
Hopefully.
anxiety, and a reminder that the systems of oppression are very much alive. And then, of course, we have this complete crisis of an economic and political situation as we look at the various existing institutions and recognize their constraints and shortcomings. So I feel like at this kind of moment, we are all so thirsty for stories of hope, for stories of constructive resilience, for stories of transcendence. And I have to say that in the past few months of just being in conversation with you, I have left every conversation feeling a great, great sense of hope. So I'm hoping that everyone present here today will, of course, leave with that same sense. And I have to say that, of course, you are an, a well-established journalist and educator who has taught at many universities, and one of the Little Rock Nine, the 9 students that were the first to integrate the all-white school called Central High, Little Rock Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas. So that itself, I think we can sit with for a while and recognize that we're in the presence of someone with such immense insight, knowledge, and just words of, I think, guidance for the rest of us who are looking to see how to transcend this moment. One of the things I was struck by, I was reading this book of yours, March Forward Girl, and it's such a beautiful kind of story of your childhood, both, and includes so many emotions, both the beauty of family, the fear and anxiety. You called it gut-wrenching fear of being a young Black child in the Jim Crow South in Little Rock, Arkansas, and then just navigating constantly these very clear boundaries of segregation. And so I was hoping that we could just start with this idea of these smaller, beautiful spaces amidst oppression, amidst great oppression, the creation of these small, beautiful spaces built on a different set of values that I think was your home as a child. So I'm hoping that you can tell us a little bit about your early childhood, Grandma India, who played such an amazing and inspirational role, and just maybe a little bit about your childhood and what inspired you to do the work that you do.
Well, I come from a family where there are two things: first, religion, and second, education. My grandfather helped to found a university. And in this time, when my grandmother was a little girl, they didn't send women to college. She was very bright. So she helped to, she lived with my mother and me, and at first my dad. My parents were divorced when I was, I think, 9. And every day we had to read Shakespeare after dinner. There are two things we were going to do. We are going to read something classical after dinner, and we were going to eat chicken 6 nights a week because we were poor. We're very poor. She would start out on Sunday night, and you'd get an actual piece of the chicken. And for the rest of the week, she would cook that same parts of that same chicken in soup, in a stew-like thing, a chicken with rice, etc. And so those were the things that were certain. No hits, no hands, no names. There was no violence in the house. And there was a continued notion that God is with you, that you are protected, and that this is how it is now. It will be different as we move along, but only if you work hard. And the things that are happening to you now that upset you are things that God has discovered and has decided will shape you to perform as an adult. So if you were somebody screamed the N-word at you today and you responded with intelligence and gust and love, then it's preparing you for tomorrow. So my home was a very warm and loving place. Most dark evenings, if it got to be dark, like particularly in winter, the Ku Klux Klan would come roaring through our community. We would have to dim our shades, dim our lights, and sometimes I'd have to do my homework in the bathroom, sitting in the bathtub with candles, because if they rode through in their car, sort of caravan, you wanted your house to appear dark. Like certainly you weren't up and you weren't going to do anything. And so all the time that I was living with these religious and intellectual people at the edge of my life, and I think this is true almost for every African American that lives, we live 2 lives, okay? One life is as an American person. The other life is as an African American within this context. Now, interestingly enough, the last administration, the Trump administration, gives me a feeling of being back in Little Rock in the 1940s. I am more edgy, more frightened, more powerless, because I feel like this is an administration who gives permission for people to castigate and destroy Blacks and people of color and people who don't think as they think. There is no room for negotiation. There's no room for discussion. But generally, my life as a small child, my mother was a teacher. My grandmother was a maid in White Ladies' Kitchens. So she would bring home a daily, like the first world globe I got was this old globe that was peeling off. And grandmother was an expert at putting together pictures. She took baking soda and she pasted all the parts back together. So she knew how to take things out of the trash of the family that she worked for to bring them home. She brought home all of their books. I mean, she had a book binding company going on in the bathroom, in the sink. She could bind a book in 20 minutes, So that's how we got our library, our extensive library. And my mother was a librarian in the beginning. Then she went back and got her master's. She was an English teacher, etc. So all of this is going on around me, you see, all of these different worlds. I'm having to become accustomed to what it means to be Black. It means that when I go downtown, I was given a set of rules. At age 4, you start out. Don't look a white person in the eye. If you are slapped or hit back, no, don't hit back. If they're coming towards you on the sidewalk, step off into the mud, even though you spent the morning polishing your brown and white shoes, because these were the rules that you operate by. So the first thing my grandmother did was to teach me about the Bible. And beyond that, she taught me the rules of survival. And she would say to me, just do it. And I would complain all the time. And she would say to me, you don't have time to complain. You must polish your skills. You must study because God has tasks for you. And this will not, life will not always be like this. And it was her building of this shield of protection. I am today the product of her teaching.
That's wonderful. And when you talk about your grandmother, I know that, many of us say we do the work that we do to extend the work of our ancestors.
Right.
And and you mentioned too in one of our conversations that what we do are for generations unborn. That, some
So, I didn't know that. And the most important thing that Martin Luther King ever did for me, my grandmother, of course, enabled me to go ahead and go to Central High School, meaning it was what she'd already put inside of me that made me want to do that. I wanted something better. I wanted a better education. I didn't even let my parents know that I had signed up to go to Central High School. But after I had gone there for a couple of weeks, it just was too big. I thought I was going to die any moment. It was the most frightening experience ever. It was horrendous enough that the president sent in the 101st Airborne. And by 2 to 3 weeks in, we wanted out. I did. We all did, because we had taken on this project that, I thought, okay, they won't like me at first, but after a week, they'll see I have a ponytail, a really long ponytail. I have great clothes Mama made for me. My shoes are polished, and I'm not the N word. I'm smart. I'm smarter than they are. As Grandma already said, my dear, if your test scores are double what theirs are, ain't no white person gonna call you the N word, right? So from the beginning, from age 3, she handed me cardboard shapes of letters and numbers, and she said, here, you are what your brain is. You are going to be somebody. And so that is what I operate on till this day. All of my feistiness, all of my unwillingness to settle comes from that era. But Martin Luther King came to a group setting one day after we'd left Central High School, where people had spat on us and kicked us and knocked us around and threatened our lives and hung ropes over trees outside with effigies on them. We came home to talk to him because he was there to sort of fluff us up a little bit. And it came my turn. And the first thing he did was interesting, because he was someone who we are not. And he entered the room, and you know right away that this is someone different. And Miss Big Mouth, I started talk. And he just looked at me for a long time, quietly, like saying, let's quiet down. And I quieted down. And when it came my turn, I whined. And I said, they put acid in my eye. They stuck me in the back with a flagpole, on and on. And he said, Melba, you can't leave now, because you're not doing this for yourself. You're doing it for generations yet unborn. It is not for you. Don't be selfish. And I thought, ugh, boy, because I was 15. I wanted to go to the prom. I wanted to have fun. And this man is telling me that all this pain I'm suffering is what? And that means I got to stay there, right? That means that one sense alone, for generations yet unborn, is like he took out a screwdriver, installed that in my soul. It's been with me all of my life. And it was a changing time in my life, because that very next day I realized, okay, march forward. Grandmother's right. See, my grandmother always said to me, march forward, girl. Shh, don't complain. You don't have time to complain. You got to march. And my first book I called Warriors Don't Cry, because she would always say, I'm a warrior for the battlefield. I'm a warrior on the battlefield of my Lord. Warriors don't cry. And that is an African-American spiritual. And so I think, what we can take from what I take from what she gave me is this is a miserable time, very frankly. I've not been out of the house since February 29th because my doctor told me, look, baby, you're 78 years of age. And this is a white man talking. One of my doctors is a white gentleman who's far up in the ranks of what's going on in medicine. And he called me just to say, hey, you're 78 years of age, you're Black. He said, let me tell you how that's going to work. They're not going to give you the ventilator first because you're Black, you're old, you're a little pudgy. And he said, basically, it's because your face is Black. And he said, that's just how that I'm going to tell you the truth of what's going on in hospitals. I want you to get a few medicines at home and put them in a basket and sit and don't leave. And at first that was really harrowing to think about. But then I remembered what my grandmother always said, and I remembered how I've gotten along all this life. And that is believing that I'm doing the right thing, believing that love and rightness works out over everything. There is fate, and there is somebody in charge somewhere. Otherwise, things wouldn't work like this. And there is a reason this president's in office. There is a reason these things are happening to us. I don't think anything's ever awakened us. See, with 78 years on the planet, I've seen almost everything. I've been here since I was born December 7th. I was born. This should have been a red flag to me. I was born December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor Day. The day they bombed Pearl Harbor, they came in and told my mother that they were bombing Pearl Harbor. And my mother, who was only weighed about 95 pounds, said she was having her bomb here because I weighed 9 pounds, 6 ounces. And it's interesting to know even why I'm on Earth. And I'll take your time to tell you this story, because I think what you'll learn is you're going to survive. They used those things that you shouldn't use, I put the name of it, to pull me out of my mother. They're like clamps on your head. And in doing so, they injured me terribly. And as a baby, I kept reaching up, scratching. And by the second day that I was on the Earth, I had a temperature above, I think it was above 100 degrees, 101, 102. And it would turn out that while I was in the delivery room, the doctor told the nurse, look, you're going to have to wash this child's head off with Epsom salts and water 2 or 3 times a day because this is an infection in her head. Shave her head to the right side. And unless you do this, she won't make it. And at the same time this was happening, this old elderly Black man was mopping the floor of the operation room. And as I was getting worse, people kept coming to the hospital, which I was in by accident anyway, that's a longer story, but kept coming to the hospital to see my mother. The minister came, and in fact, they were giving me the last rites. And the man who had been in the operating room left for a day, came back on Tuesday. I was born on Sunday morning. He leaves for Monday because he's off. He comes back Tuesday, and he passes by my room. And this is the happenstance. He passes by my room, and he says, oh, because he hears my mother and my grandmother cry, and the minister's in there giving me the last rites. And he says, oh, okay, I guess their Epsom salts didn't work because the nurse didn't do it to me. And my grandmother said, what did you say? And he said, I guess that, he says, the doctor's told to put the Epsom salts. And my grandmother ran down the hall. She passes the nurse. She asks the nurse, why didn't she do it? And the woman said, give you in people an inch, you take a mile. I'm not going to spoil you. I'm not going to mollycoddle you. My grandmother washed out and get the Epsom salts. She comes back. She washes my head. That is the only reason I lived. That is the only reason I live. But what it does teach me every day is that we are here by grace of faith in God, whatever God you believe in. Grandma always just said, we're all on the same road. We're marching down. We're all walking towards and by the music of our own gods. And that's cool because we're all going to the same destination, or at least we hope we are. And so the point being that no matter what is going on now, if I've survived all these 78 years, if you just believe that it is all a lesson, and what I say often about these days, I want to make sure I get every lesson every day because I do not wish to go this way again.
Mhm.
These have been difficult days. I've been in the house since February 29th, and I find new things to do every day. I'm writing another book. Yes, I can knit. Okay, I'm working out Sudoku puzzles. Okay, calling new friends, zooming everybody. You get with it. And so this is a difficult time, but I cannot leave the screen without saying I've marched 100 times in my life at least, and ain't nothing as effective as your vote. Okay, marches, people rebuke. Later, there's a kickback sometimes for marches. But nobody can kick back your vote. Your vote is the loudest voice you'll ever have. And I understand some people don't vote because they don't think their vote will be counted. Vote, you know. So
Thank
that's what I have to share about sort of my feelings.
Thank you for sharing that story too, because I think the theme of your grandmother giving you life comes through in many forms throughout this book and is so beautiful. That relationship, just the presence of people that are life affirming in your life, those that affirm and strengthen, and give you that sense of purpose is so critical. And I know that we as educators think about this a lot because, on the one hand, we are in education because we believe in the transformative power of education. At
Absolutely.
the same time, we also know that schools and institutions can, in some ways, if not consciously thinking about these issues, perpetuate some of the inequities and perpetuate some of the issues within our status quo. And so, one thing that really struck me too was that within your own family, your mother was one of the first Black women to get a PhD from University of Arkansas, and then she later became a teacher. And then you, of course, have been immersed in the field of education all these years. And
Because that's the only way it could be.
and in your childhood too, it's really interesting how many times the theme came up that you felt that education was your way out of Little Rock, and that in many ways you wanted out to experience
Out,
a different.
out, out.
And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that as well. It's clear that you were this precocious child with so many questions, and as you ask these questions, many times for your own safety, you were told, "Don't ask questions; just follow the rules. It's about survival." And I can imagine that many in our community feel that way even now. How do we I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that sense of, you were at this school where you were realizing that you weren't getting what you wanted, and then right near your house was this shiny, beautiful
Mm.
Central High School, that in many ways was known nationwide for its beautiful programming and all these great teachers and so on. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that transition and your experiences in education, and when you felt drained and in some ways, the opposite of feeling affirmed. So, what were those spaces within your educational experience where you felt affirmed, there was a strong sense of purpose, and then those experiences, as you've outlined in your books, of where, the dehumanizing was very much at play?
Here's what's important to know. My grandmother was a maid in White Lady's Kitchen. She was also a maid in the hotel, Capitol Hotel. That same hotel, I go to Arkansas and I insist on the presidential suite these days because we went to the back door of that hotel to get the food that grandma scraped off of trays so we could survive. Things do change. She kept saying things will change. And the first realization See, I have this line, which the New York Times and all the books talked about as being a profound line. It took me months to come up with this line, and it's this: nobody, but particularly people of color, Black folks aren't born knowing they're second class citizens. It's not like somebody bends over the crib and says, "Hey, Melba, you're not going to be able to vote. You're not going to have equal rights. You're not going to be accorded the equal privilege of riding on this bus or drinking out of this fountain." Nobody does that. Instead, your self-esteem is usurped day by day by day and teaspoon by teaspoon by teaspoon. So my first realization that I wasn't equal was being up in the arms of my father, who was 6 feet, 6 inches tall. And I loved, that was my favorite place in the world when I was 3, 4, 5, like that. And we get out of a car, and as we get out of a car, this white man's car whizzes up beside us and almost kills us. And my pop jumps back, and I'm in his arm. And this white man begins to screech at my father and curse him out. And my father, who was very strong and muscular, said nothing. Instead, he got tears in his eyes streaming down his face. And the man told him, he said, "I'm going to take that monkey out of your arms, and I'll beat you over the head with it." Now, I didn't know everything he said because I'm like, what, 4 at the time? But what I did know was that my father kowtowed to that. Okay? So that's the first realization that I had. Look, if my father can't take care of himself, who's in charge of me? So you're absolutely right. I wanted out of Little Rock. And I was, number one, psychic. I didn't know the word for that when I was little. But for example, I'd come in the house, I'd tell people at church, "There's a baby in your tummy," or this, that, and the other, so that people at church would offer my mother pounds of bacon and eggs to have me read for them. And my grandmother said, "Absolutely not. It says in the Bible that those are skills that are given to some of us, but we never take money and we don't read for it." And so she said, "You shut up. The only thing you can say to adults is good morning, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And here, I'm going to do it." So she gave me my first diary. She said, "Write what you think down in the diary. Don't say anything to anybody. The only time that you can say things about what you think is at home, because you can't keep telling people about their futures," which is what I was doing, right? And so early on in life, I wasn't like an ordinary child. I was like watching what was going on. So why would we go to the grocery store and they could talk to my parents that way? And my mother, by the way, was also a genius. My mother spoke 6 languages and was offered to join the Men's Society. She was an interesting woman who was odd to live with, because she too could say, "You're thinking about talking back to me, clean the refrigerator." So it was difficult. I lived in this family where intellectually it was a different pattern there. My grandmother may have gone to work in White Lady's kitchens, but at night she was reading Shakespeare. You know what I mean? So these are interesting but odd characters. And so from the beginning, my grandmother just read me the Bible and told me, "You're going to be okay. There is this one saving factor. It's God. What does God expect of you? He's going to give you assignments. And God expects you to hone all your skills and all your talents and to do the best you can do each and every day." Okay? There's something expected of you, no matter what God you worship or what it is you like on life. That's cool. She said, even if you want to worship that blade of grass in the backyard, fine. But you got to have a system of behavioral codes, and you have to have things that you're dedicated to do. One of them should be to improve yourself. And if you do that, things will get better. So this is the system under which I grew up. You got to write down what is your goal for the month of September. What do you hope to do? There is no day that can go by without some sort of prayer. And do I ever get despondent? Oh, hey, when Mr. Floyd, when that policeman had his knee on that man's neck, and I have been close to death not long ago. I was in the intensive care. And what you do close to death is you call out mother. When Floyd started calling for his mother, and that guy did not lift his knee, that blew me away for more than 2 weeks. I had to go out and get a therapist because it just completely dissembled me. And my grandmother taught me that when you're dissembled as a human, when you feel like you're powerless and you can't go anywhere, she always taught me, just get up in the morning and say one word, one line: "God loves me." That's all you need to say. all day long, no matter what thought emerges. I remember as a child, one of the ways she gave me value was to say, look, brown is pretty. You're beautiful. God has your picture on his refrigerator. He's looking at that every day because you're so pretty. So she used to say to me, God is listening. Pray. Understand that you are loved. Understand that you have a future. And understand that you're important, no matter who you are. We had no money. I told you, the four of us, my brother, my mother, myself, my grandmother, we had this one chicken that we ate through the week. We had no money. But we had books, we had love. And so what I would say, no matter who you are, who's listening or who's watching, is that you are important. It's interesting how each of our gods made each of us interestingly important. And one of the things you have to count on is that there's a reason for you being here. You know, I keep telling myself, there's a reason that I'm here at 78. Keep writing. And there is a reason that you're living through the pandemic. And there's a reason that you're living through this administration. All of it is lesson time. So I think, that's what we have to do. So that no matter what happened in my life, certainly Central High School was difficult. There is no word for being in a place where every single day things are rough enough that you need soldiers to get you through. Dynamite thrown down on your head, acid in your eyes, all of that I have experienced. And yes, you get depressed. I got very depressed. I came home one day and told grandma I was going to kill myself. And she said, what a good idea. That'll make all the white racists happy. Go for it. And from that moment on, she started talking to me about, is that what you really want to do? You really want to defy the promise of God? You really want to announce to God that you're not grateful for all that he has given you? So it's just important to keep in mind, whoever you are, you're special, you're important, there's no duplicate, and you got to make a set of hopes for yourself. You got to have hopes.
That's such an important reminder, just to think and reflect on ourselves and our role and our purpose. And um, one of the things I'm really struck by is, you know, even in this moment, especially for those for whom the burden is more heavy of these, deep inequities and the circumstances we're in, how do we both, on the one hand, acknowledge the trauma and the difficulties, like you're saying, that the struggles are so real and the burden is so heavy, and on the other hand, I'm thinking about the words of Angela Davis and others who say there's a need for this radical imagination also of where we're going. What are we trying to imagine? How do we transcend? And this is what makes me so excited to be in the field of education, is to create spaces where we can be together to sit with the reality of the struggle, to sit with the reality of trauma, and then to be in a position where we can start to then imagine different possibilities. And I know that as I was reading your story, I was struck by moments when your father, for instance, would help you all imagine something different. Oh, someday it'll be great, and so on. And then moments when, in that process of imagining, there were still constraints that you were kind of brought back into reality. So, I was really struck by that. And then that went hand in hand with the memoir of John Lewis. I was recently reading
Yes.
his memoir, where he talks about this idea of the long game. We're in the long game. There's immediate struggles, but we're here. I think, to paraphrase what he said, something like, our work is not the work of one generation,
No, no, no,
the
no.
work of multiple generations. And he says something like, freedom is not a plateau where we suddenly reach and enjoy the bounties. That freedom is action every day. Um,
Yeah. See, kept thinking I was going to graduate.
yeah,
And I am so disappointed that I'm 78 and we haven't straightened these edges. If you had told me when I was 16 that I was going to be 78 and you and I'd be discussing this, I'd say, oh, nah, but John saw me the last time he saw me before he passed away. He came actually to Arkansas for a celebration of our anniversary, the last anniversary we had. And I had had 3 spine surgeries and I was in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk a long, long ways. And he walked up behind me and there's a picture of him and me on my Instagram. And what he is telling me, he has his hand on my shoulder. And what he is telling me is, Melba, get up out of the chair. He said, now you above all else, you know we don't got time for that. What is wrong with you? And it's interesting because a few days before that, I had run into Hillary Clinton. And Hillary and Bill were looking for me because we all know each other very well. And I thought, I don't know what I thought. Did I think they were going to come over with, loving, charming, oh, it's too bad you don't. No. Hillary said, get the hell up out of the chair. What are you doing in the chair? You don't have a right to be in that chair. We need you. Stand up now. And President Clinton, who my brother was one of his personal bodyguards, said, are you kidding? Does your brother know what you're doing? And so it's sort of like this thing, like even with Obama. I remember when I first met him, I met him when he came to California before he was, high up on the rung of running. And I said to him, listen, you young whippersnapper, because at that point I was on the road for Hillary Clinton. And you were saying about the limit of imagination. Within my scope of imagination, I couldn't imagine that he'd be president. Okay. And I thought, okay, you're starting too early. I trust Hillary. I know Hillary. Not many people understand her big background. But as a younger woman with old tennis shoes on, she walked the dirty heights of North Little Rock, teaching Black women that they had rights to health education, or health insurance, that they should not be raped without fussing, etc. So I was out campaigning for her. So I said, listen, young whippersnapper, let this roll and blah, blah. And he said, no, I'm telling you, And he said, I'm standing on your shoulders. It's your shoulders I'm standing on. So I thought about that. And within 2 days, I said to the Clintons, I said, this man has something that I have. His skin is the same color. So I got to do it. Right. And the day that he became president, yes, I was invited to the inauguration, not bragging, but we just were. The 9 of us were. I stayed home and there were like hundreds of reporters on my lawn. And they said, what do you have to say? And I said, nothing. I was in the house crying because, like so many people who you saw crying in that crowd, I thought to myself, I wonder if only Martin Luther King, Dr. King, could see this. And then a voice said, he is seeing it. So yes, these limitations, everybody who is of color, particularly Indian or African American, you've got to read this book called Caste. Okay, you've got to read the book called Caste. Then you're going to know what I'm going to say, which is therein you get to see the systemic racism that limits and can limit. What my grandmother and mother did say to me was, there are no limits. Like once my physician said to me, you can't be a news reporter. Well, excuse you. Less than a year later, I was an NBC News reporter. Don't tell me, if you give me a list of what I cannot do, that's what I'm going to get done pretty quickly here. And so you got to envision, the guy said to me, you're fat and you're Black. You can't be a news reporter. There are no Black news reporters in San Francisco. Really? I mean, that steamed me. Just steamed me. What do you mean? And a couple of years later, he was inviting me to his house to show his friends that there he knew that face on NBC TV. And I refused to go to him for dinner or to have him as my physician after that point. So you got to know for yourself who you are and what you can be. And yes, occasionally, my grandmother said, it's like an elephant being tied by a string. There are no constraints. There is no limit. I mean, Obama has shown more than I ever had that there is no limit. He and his wife first had to think of him as president. And in this generation, in this time, in my lifetime, I never, and I've talked to some other Black people who are very conscious civil rights, and they agree with me. We never, ever in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s imagined that this man would come along and he would have, excuse me, the skill and the prowess to do this. So you have to get beyond what you can see. You have to pull that string that tethers you, and you have to say, yes, I'm fat and I'm black, but excuse me, call me an NBC News reporter, because that's what I was for 7 years. Thank you very much. And so what I did was to get myself a scholarship to Columbia University in New York. I went through that special program where they chose 80 people or so out of the United States because they were trying to infiltrate news with, minority people. I got admitted to that, and I became, so, don't tell me what I'm not gonna be. So I would say to anybody who's watching, no matter where you are, I mean, when I went back to look, when I went back to USF for another doctor, people said to me, "Oh, Melba, you're 62. You shouldn't do that at that age." I had the happiest time. My first earlier years through school were all tainted by segregation and ashiness and me having to be. I never told some of the people who knew that I was at USF, I never told anybody who I was until the end or what I'd done or anything. I just went through there as a student. And I must tell you, the love I got, there came a time when I got really sick. I had a really bad cold. I should have been home. And what I thought, what was really impressed me was the students that were around me, that didn't, not all of them knew me that well. One said, "Okay, I've got her books. Have you got her purse? Listen, where's your cough medicine, dear?" And they would take me up the stairs or say, "You go in the elevator, we'll meet you." And so do what you want to do. I mean, I graduated on my walker. Do what you want to do, because that's what I wanted to do. And so I would encourage people to not be limited by anything, because if we allow people to limit us, no, you are meant to be the greatest of who you are, and you are someone very special.
Thank you for that beautiful affirmation for all those who are listening. I'm really glad you brought up the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, because as someone who grew up in a country with a very deep and oppressive caste system, I think that her ability to draw parallels between the oppressive structures in the US that continue to target and harm Black individuals and communities, and this oppressive caste system that has been in place specifically in South Asia for centuries now, is very, very enlightening of the deep systems and structures that are in place to perpetuate this type of oppression. So, as we think about then the work ahead of us, which is to systemically approach this work of striving for freedom, striving for justice. Um, I know that you've often said, all my life I've marched. I-
All my life.
I've marched with, and you've marched with amazing people, some of yourself being one of those civil rights icons that we look up to and gain inspiration from. As we think about this moment of, somewhat of a, what do you call it, just a disappointment perhaps with these systems and structures that are in place, just recognizing that we've come so far and yet in many ways we seem to still be entrenched. What are your thoughts on that type of systemic change that's required for us to change
When
this?
I was a baby and growing up in Little Rock, the very first step that came to me that my grandmother had to do is you've got to diagnose the problem. Do not get distracted by not seeing what is wrong. Horrifying things are going on. You can't get unraveled by them. Some of them you have to take as a joke. Example, When I get in an airplane, it never fails, never, ever fails that the woman offers me, she won't take my coat to hang it up, and she points me to the black back seat, and says, "Oh, you'll need to hurry, because I'm old, slow walking." And that's when I hand her that orange tag I have. It says VIP, first class. Okay? Oh, then she apologizes. Oh, well, then let me hang up your jacket. Okay? We can't stop our knowledge and our understanding that we are systematized. Exactly where would you like to attack the system? Understand, I mean, you have to recast. I've done recently a whole series on Apple TV with Oprah and with the author of that book, and it startled me. It startled me. I told you my best brother friend in the world is from India, and he had said the familiarity of this system. And what really fascinated me was that in order to set up the caste system, they went to the University of Arkansas. Hello? Now, why does that ring that the Jim Crow laws and the way I grew up was what set up a system that is across the world, right? My University of Arkansas, where my mother later went, and you know how my mother got her degree at the University of Arkansas? They put her inside a fence. I do mean a wooden fence. And every day she had to go in the classroom and sit in the fence, inside the fence, where the rest of the class sat outside the fence. Okay? If she needed to go potty, she got up and the teacher came with a key and unlocked the fence. And then she went out because she had to sit in the fence and listen to the lecture. Okay? So yes, the first thing to do is realize what's going on wrong. So much as even the university I taught at, you look around you and you say, well, wait a minute. What did you just do to me that isn't acceptable among your colleagues? Like, first you have to identify what is going on and then how you're going to approach it. And I loved, what the incredible, and I can't think of her name right because I'm so excited. The incredible woman said, she said, yes, you must carry your banner forward and you must do your fight, but you must always do it in a way in which people will join you. Okay. And so I think when you look at Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream, and you look at his writings, they are instructions to us as to how to march forward. Okay. And we need to look at that speech. I look at it all the time, line for line. Look what he wrote line for line. They are instructions that we must keep our dignity. No, we don't burn buildings. The thing that did us the greatest harm during these latest marches were the negativity, the criminalism, the criminal aspect. And the president knows that. So he sent people to make sure that that part showed. But we have to keep moving forward. And we have to keep doing what we know is right. And we have to keep training ourselves to be ready to partake of opportunity. And we have to be willing. Not a one of us who's ever made it anywhere can tell you that we did so without taking risks. There are risks to be taken. And accepting things as they are when you see them go wrong. Speak up, say something, do something. And does that mean that I do something about everything? No, sometimes I just have fun. For example, racing for a parking spot. Okay, that happens. And then, so I race for this parking spot, and this white woman rushes up to me and she calls, use the N word and says, that's my spot. Now, I could fight her back or say ugly words, but instead I said to her, I was going to have fun. I said, okay. I said, this is disagreement. Let's get on our knees and let us pray together. I said, if you had a rough day, I probably took your parking spot because we were having a bad day. Let us pray together. Okay, well, so when I say let's pray together, get on our knees, this woman starts backing up with her hands in the air because she thinks I'm out of my mind, right? So now I've had a little fun. In other words, I don't fight until it's big. If it's small, either ignore it, right, or play with it, okay? I think that being Black or being of color is a fun game you have to play because, if you're white, there's not that challenge. There's a whole layer of challenge. As Grandma said, Black is an inconvenient color, but it can also be a game, have fun with it. And so you have to really get that kind of, you're in charge, you're mastering this lifetime. It is your connection with your maker or whomever you choose to worship that's going to make your life what you want to do. And you have the ability to do that. God blesses all of us with such talent and such wealth that we just need to see it.
Well, Melba, we could talk for hours. Every time I talk to you, I feel like I could just listen to you for hours and hours, and I feel like I leave a better person, more motivated, more hopeful. And what you just said might just be the perfect way to end since our time is coming to an
Yeah.
end. Um, but I just want to say one more time that thank you not only for sharing your story. I know that oftentimes we ask you to share your story because it's so inspiring to us, but I also realize that sharing stories brings up a whole lot of feelings and so for those who are telling the story. So I just want to thank you for doing that for all of us today, everyone here. And thank you for sharing this story also because I feel like it's so timely. We're all sitting with so many burdens, with so many feelings, with the emotional, mental impact of this moment, some more than others. And really, I think we're trying to figure out how do we transcend. We're looking to our elders, we're looking for sources of inspiration, we're looking to those stories of constructive resilience, those stories of beautiful resistance, the stories of forward movement, to figure out how we can transcend this moment. And you are a living example of that.
I just want to say that start every day with 5 things you're grateful for. Don't start the ugly list till you do 5 things you're grateful for. Each of us has 5 things. First of all, our eyes open, we breathe, there's food in the refrigerator, look up, there's a roof, otherwise, and you're wearing clothes. Those are 5. Everybody's got 5 things. Start with that.
Wonderful reminder. And thank you again. We are so fortunate to have you in our community. We are so proud to be able to say you are an alumnus of the University of San Francisco and the School of Education. Thank you so much, Melba. And to close us out with some concluding thoughts, I'd like to invite our fearless leader, the president of the University of San Francisco, Father Paul Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Dr. Beals, for inspiring us again. Every time we invite you back to your alma mater, you remind us why we have this mission to walk with folks like you towards a better future by facing with courage the challenges and the structural injustices woven into our society today. I can still hear in your voice today the courage of that 14-year-old girl who faced hatred with faith and with hope. Your courage, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the strength of faith, and your faith continues to shine. Thank you for reminding us that love and justice will triumph. And we can speed their triumph by showing up in their progress. Thank you for demonstrating the transformative power of a Jesuit education. You came to us, a bit later in life, but you already embodied the best of what we do here. Educate young people, educate middle-aged folks to have a platform, in your case, a doctorate, have a platform upon which you can stand and speak those same truths that you knew as a 14-year-old. And you learn deeply through your 20s and 30s as a journalist, as an educator, as an advocate for social justice, and as a university professor. thank you for still writing. Your next book is going to be a guide to a better future, one freed from the systems of caste, from the illusions of innate superiority, from the stumbling blocks of racism that trip us up as we're on our way to the reign of God. And thank you for reminding us that playfulness can be holiness. I want to thank Dean Shabnam Koirala-Azad for your heroic leadership of our School of Education, which remains one of the most amazing, progressive, diverse. I think we still have the only masters in human rights education in the country. So thank you for leading an amazing community of faculty, staff, and students who are preparing to, graduate folks who go out and affect tremendous positive change in local communities. Education is the transformation of society towards a better future. So thank you, Dr. Beals. Thank you, Dr. Koirala-Azad. Thanks all of you for joining us today. We are halfway through Founders Week. So 165 years ago, the University of San Francisco started as a one-room schoolhouse on Market Street with 3 Jesuits and 3 students. We've come a long ways. We're looking forward to a bright future. We have one more amazing event this week. Thanks for those of you who could join us on Monday for a terrific conversation with Megan Rapinoe, a soccer player and an advocate for social justice and for the recognition of the beauty and the dignity and the worth of every human person. We had a deep dive into those themes today, and we'll have one more chance on Friday to sit with another amazing USF alumnus, Michael Franti, poet, musician, advocate for social justice. He and his wife, Sarah, will lead us through an amazing conversation that will, just as today and just as Monday, inspire us to find 5 things we're grateful for, and then plant our feet on the floor and move into the next day where we make the world better. So let's continue to change the world for the better from here. God bless you all. Thank you.